Hey, welcome back to The Recap, the video podcast ministry of First Baptist Kettering, where we discuss topics such as our vision, our values, and our sermons from week to week. The Recap exists to help us be transformed by Jesus. So with that, let's get started. And back around the table, man, it's so fun for everybody to be here.
What's your name again?
Norman Quackenbush.
Norman Quackenbush.
Quackenbush.
Yes.
So you were out for a couple weeks on vacation.
Mm-hmm. One
One
and a
week,
half.
1.5 weeks.
Yes, I don't want to make it sound like I'm
But
lazy.
you had a good time.
We experienced another part of the country that we've never been to, Michigan. It was really
Different
nice.
place, on the
it was really
recommendation of a dear friend.
The guy across the table.
Guy across the
I
table.
love it. I can't
Vacations
help
in
it.
Michigan all the time. Yeah, it was really surprisingly just beautiful to know that is here, close by. I mean, we're going back. I mean, we'll go
There
back.
you go.
Yeah.
You're a fan now.
Yeah.
You're a believer.
Yeah, just not going to take the kids with me next time.
Well, sometimes they have to go along with us.
I could go to the KOA down the road without my kids, and it'd be a great vacation.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and Pastor Chad, here we are back together. This is Vacation Bible School Week here at Sugar Creek. So we've got a lot going on, crazy time.
Busy week.
This summer has felt, it just hasn't felt like summer. It's felt like
been
something
busy.
altogether different with a bunch of camps and Vacation Bible School. And now we're going to spend some time looking at Ecclesiastes 11. Over the past couple weeks, we've seen some of our friends lose some loved ones. The Lord has called some home, and today we celebrated the life of one of them together. And actually, at their request, we went back and looked at a passage in Ecclesiastes from a few weeks ago. And it's just so helpful and practical to consider the impact of Ecclesiastes in our life that one day the Lord's going to call each of us home. And what is the impact of our life going to be? Today, I want to talk about this passage from this Sunday, Ecclesiastes 11. But as we do, one of the values that we have, right? We always talk about, I say values, it's one of our measures. Living life as a real lifer, right? And sometimes we can use that phrase, that grouping of words, I'm a real lifer. It can almost sound sarcastic, but in this passage, we look at something where being a real lifer can also mean living boldly. So, walk me through in the writing of your sermon for this week, preparing. You thought about how Solomon is speaking about taking risk, living boldly. What are some things that just the Lord impressed on your heart where there's some boldness that we have to live with currently today? What are some applications of that?
Yeah, I'll start. First of all, we were real lifers on Sunday when we were talking to the church at large about giving. It's never an easy subject to talk about, with a congregation. They don't like hearing it and you don't like saying it, but I started with that. I talked about that measure is something we celebrate. So I apologized to the guest and said, hey, we're going to have a little family talk here, and you guys are welcome to stay in and just kind of listen in on, maybe you're looking at our church as a potential place to call home, and you'll see how we conduct a little bit of family business. And so we did that. And this is a really funny thing. In chapter 11 of Ecclesiastes, Solomon uses some financial terms, which we'll get at, I'm sure, in a second. But he uses these financial phrases and terms and principles. And I'm looking out into the audience, and Todd, my accountant, is sitting there. And I'm giving all these principles about diversification and taking risks and retirement and all these other things. And I'm looking over there at Todd, and I'm going, okay, he knows exactly what this guy is making and what he's doing. So real lifer, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I really feel like we got that point across well at Eastmont. What about you guys here?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of the same. It's just anytime you're talking and calling people to live boldly, you can't live boldly if you're not living real. Because living real really requires you to be out there in faith and to be a faith walker. Those two go so closely together. So, we did the same thing. We talked about taking risk, investing in the kingdom, using time, talent, treasure to impact lostness.
Not just money.
It's everything. And that's that first section that really just bleeds into living boldly in all areas of life.
Yeah.
So one of those, in verse 3, I just want to read this. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth, and if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. Like there's this acceptance of some circumstances are they just are what they are. But this moving forward, walking, David, you said walking by faith requires diversifying resources when life gets unpredictable. And yours, he's got 1 point for two verses, and Chad, you kind of have these two things, but they're the same. Don't be paralyzed by what you can't see, but move forward, being bold. So, practically speaking, we live in a culture where sometimes we can be scared, especially right now. Right? There's a lot of reasons for us to hold tightly to things, to get into duck and cover retreat mode. Like, I'm just going to protect my four walls. But God is calling us to do something different. And how would you encourage, outside of giving, right, or investing? What are some other ways that we can encourage both campuses to lean into moving forward?
Yeah, I think you're going to hear a lot of that in the next few months as we finish Ecclesiastes in a couple weeks. We're going to lay out a vision series. And, I've floated that. I always try to get the pulse of our people as I'm getting ready to do certain things or share certain things. And, there's always a tendency in moments like this where there's the economy's not good and people tend to hold on tighter. And do we really need to move forward right now, or should we just kind of make sure everything's locked in and secure where it is? And there's always value in stopping and saying, are we prepared for any kind of downturn? There's value in that. So I'm not saying we move forward recklessly. But it's in opportunities like this when everybody else, it's like a financial advisor. I hate to keep going back to finances, but your financial advisor will tell you it's when things are tightening up and people are selling, that's when the smart people are coming in and buying. And so when everything around you is closing in, that's actually the best time to venture out. And I think that's also true in the kingdom. I think you see that, like, just to take it to an extreme example, like in China, the government is closing in on the church. And the tendency for me would be to, we need to be more secret.
Be careful.
We need to be more careful. We need to be more quiet. They have the opposite approach, which is, now's the time to really get the gospel
Let's
out.
go.
That's
and
faith.
So they take the gospel and it explodes and expands. And I think the American church has a lot to learn from that mentality of now is not the time to hunker down and to think about, oh my goodness, what if? Now's the time to say, hey, the harvest field is ripe. Let's go, let's get out there.
Yeah, I hit on the same points, Chad. I mean, whereas I kind of shifted to service as an application point for this, because life is unpredictable. He mentions you don't know where a tree's going to fall.
Right.
And so,
but I do love that one line. He goes, but where it falls, there it lies.
There it is.
It's just like, chill out. Don't worry. No worries. It's like all these little, here's another one that came to mind. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Just all of these little principles come to play, and it was just really solid. I had several comments after the service. Here's a good word: perseverance. What Chad was just talking about. My dad told me before he passed away, keep giving even when the market's down. Keep giving steady. And my encouragement was keep serving. Even when it gets hard, keep serving. The kingdom of God needs you. You've got gifts for a purpose. You don't need to burn it at both ends. You need to have wisdom. Solomon talks about that too. But, steady as she goes. I think that was really good.
It's easier to give when there's a lot of folks around you doing the same thing. It's easy to serve when you're surrounded by a crowd. It's hard to do when folks are bailing, right? God calls us to, stay consistent.
And I hate to keep going back to like the financial situation, but like when the stock market's going up every day, it's easy to put your money in.
Oh yeah.
But when the stock market's red a bunch, it's really tough to let go of it because you're like, well, what if it goes down? Well, what if it goes down? Well, that's really back to that first point about, casting it out to 7 or 8 on the water. And am I willing to take that risk that it could go down when the long history tells me, but over time it will go up. And I have to be willing to take the short-term risk in order to get the long-term gain. And that's really a lot of what the kingdom is. It's putting off in the short term something in order that in the long term you get greater gain.
And the hope
in the kingdom, in heaven.
In the kingdom, our hope is in something that we can't see.
Right.
Right. There's so many things, so many questions that I have.
And the whole world's saying, sell it.
Out.
And you're going, well, they're saying, sell Christ. You don't need that in your life.
No, yeah, right.
And yet we ought to be doubling down. We ought to be buying in. It's like, no, I want more of Christ. When the world's saying you don't need that, I'm like, no, I need a lot more of that.
Did you just say doubling down?
I did say doubling
He said
down.
that. It came back.
Yes.
How many years ago?
He always gives me a hard time.
David's catchphrase, double up, double down, whatever you want to call it.
But I agree. Man,
so
right on.
let's think about this then. I'm looking at a statement on perseverance and doing things regardless of knowing the outcome. You can't live in fear and live in uncertainty, right? We know, one, that God exists and he blesses those who pursue him, right? But he also allows us to experience things to push us more into a relationship with him. And Chad, you're talking about living boldly, and what you said here is it's an active posture. It's so easy to be lulled to sleep into comfort as a Western Christian. What you were just talking about in China, these folks fight for their faith. In other countries like Vietnam, they have to study in secret as well, but they're hungry for it and they do it at risk. So as we in a Western church, in a culture that is scared, as we look at that and we engage in that world, how can we as church leaders, not just here, but across the landscape, lean into actively living out our faith with a little bit more boldness and a little less fear? Where do you think we start?
Okay, I got one. It came up because of the passage. Okay, there's these words that Solomon uses, I think, that are really even more evidence than we see in the Psalms and other places, that life is in the womb. And he says something quite boldly. He's like, I get it. You can't figure it out. It's a mystery that there can be a spirit-filled human with bones in the womb of a woman. Yeah, okay. You can't figure it out. But what do you do with that? You persevere. You keep moving. So I think a good application there is sometimes preachers, sometimes Christians need to speak out in love. It's like having wisdom when you're walking by faith. But we need to speak the truth in love during those times when it's not so popular to speak about certain subjects. So I think whether it's giving, whether it's some of these hot topics we have that today, but yeah, I don't know how you would.
I've started the whole sermon really by talking about the sovereignty of God, because if you have a right view of the sovereignty of God, then you can walk boldly, because ultimately you're not in control. And so you can trust God with whatever the outcome is, whether it's investing, whether it's how you live your life, whether it's serving, whatever it may be. And I really went to salvation with that verse there when he's talking about the baby in the womb and how God does that. We don't understand how he does that. And I reference that to John chapter 3, where Jesus is meeting with Nicodemus, and they're also talking about something being born, right? And Nicodemus is thinking, how can I be born again? Like, how can I be like a baby in the womb and be born again? And Jesus basically says, hey, the wind blows where way? The Spirit, because that back part of that verse in Ecclesiastes is about the Spirit of God moving.
And the wind.
And the wind.
Yeah, I love
and he
that.
says, you don't know where the wind blows because it's not up to you. You don't have control over that. You don't have control over whether a tree falls to the north or the south.
That's good.
You don't have control over any of these things, but yet you trust and yet you believe. And that's when the Spirit of God moves and works powerfully. And so it's back to the sovereignty of God, just trusting in his goodness, in his grace, in his power. But at the same time, because that passage is also talking about, but don't just sit around and do nothing. You have a responsibility in that sovereignty to act and move and do well and use and think wisely and practice good things. And so that's kind of how I would say you can't really live boldly if you don't have a good understanding of the sovereignty and power of God.
I think one of the things that I'm looking at David's notes here for Sunday, and there's a word that keeps sticking out to me while you're talking about embracing God's sovereignty and embracing his role and standing firm for what he teaches from his word, right? What we should do.
He's the truth.
He's the truth.
He's the truth, and we can trust that.
There's one word: celebration and blessings. That even in the midst of something that's hard, that's scary, even when times are easy and celebration is a little bit more readily embraced by folks. And right now, a lot of folks are thinking, man, the world's falling apart and everything's, if you listen to culture very much, there's two polar opposite positions, right? But I think our responsibility should be to point people to the hope we have in Christ, God's sovereignty, that He is still in control, and that regardless of how it feels, we have still been given so many blessings. Mm-hmm. He has been so good to us. And that embraces those things. I've been listening to a lot of folks sharing about the landscape of our faith in this culture, and folks are hungry just for a little bit of hope.
Yeah, those last couple of verses in chapter 11 are quite telling. It's like a roller coaster. I refer to a roller coaster. It's like, hey, you got a great life. Receive those blessings that God has given to us in life. He said that before in other places, and He certainly has said, the bottom of the hill stuff about death. And as I was talking about it at Eastmont, you just officiated for me while I was out of town, a funeral for one of the sweet ladies in our church. And as I was talking about life, celebrating life, and the reality of death, she started tearing up. And I looked into one of our guests who came to our Discover Eastmont after church, and he just started weeping. He just started weeping, Patrick, when I started talking. And then I asked him, I said, man, I noticed that was kind of emotional, that part of the sermon. And he said, I've lost 2 of my siblings in the last few months. And I got to talk about Grief Share. I got to talk about our church family. But yeah, man, that was real. It was real.
Let's point him to hope and who God is, and
Amen.
That's timely word for our culture. When we sit down and we look at what's coming next, what sermon series, I'm just blown away that Ecclesiastes fits right here with everything that we experience. So, again, thank you guys for hanging out this afternoon. Welcome back.
See you all again. Yeah.
Let's Go Rocks and Vacation Bible School. Listen, if you are joining us for the first time, thank you for joining us for the recap. Look down below and click that like and subscribe button. We would love to stay in touch. You can keep up with everything that we're doing here, whether you join us in person or online for worship this week. We look forward to seeing you. Let's continue to be the church. Have a great day.